Welcome back to Mellow Makes. Today we're settling the age-old debate, Team Aqua or Team Magma. We are going to be building a Kyogre and Groudon Primal Showdown diorama from scratch. Grab your Pokedex, let's get started. I'm starting with just a few layers of 1-inch insulation foam. Nothing fancy here, we're just going to go ahead and cut them to size, snapping them off at their pieces and then hot gluing them together. Always make sure to use the proper technique, the swirls are the best. Once we've stacked up our foam, we're going to go ahead and take a serrated edge knife and start slicing away all of those harsh corners. To get a more natural look, don't overthink the cuts. On the left, I'm hacking away a jagged, tiered volcano. On the right, I'm carving out the depths of the ocean floor. It's basically like being a legendary Pokemon myself, just with way less Hyper Beam and more, foam dust. Once I've settled on a basic shape, I grab my other tools, a pair of pliers, and then I just start ripping and tearing at the foam. An hour and a half later, we look like this. I also went ahead and dug out a channel for the lava. Next up, we're going to just beat it with a rock. The rock will soften any harsh corners and edges, while also giving us some texture to those flat tops. This is what the rocks look like before and after we've hit them with a rock. Let's go ahead and finish it up. There we go, that's a more proper rock texture. However, now I need to find a way to hide the seams between each section of the rocks. So I went ahead and mixed up a dirt mixture. This is spackling paste, brown and black paint, along with some gravelly bits in order to give it some more texture. And then I'm just going to use my finger and coat every single corner. This will get rid of some of those edges that I worked hard to get, but it will hide those ugly lines that we would get otherwise. Now at first I only focused on those edges that would show, and then I decided, you know what, to hell with it. Why don't I just cover the whole thing? Yeah, I think that'll be fine. It'll give the entire piece more texture, and it'll get rid of any of those cracks that I don't want to have seen anyway. So this is what we're left with. Now the next step is actually going to be coating all this brown in a black dark base coat, mainly because I just want it to be a lot darker than this. Alright, and the next step is to add white where the water and lava are going to be. So I'm grabbing out my tube of white paint and then just splattering it on there and then spreading it with a paintbrush. And now that we've marked out where the fire and the water are going to be, I'm going to turn my attention to those super dark rocks and start dry brushing. Since they were super dark, I don't have to worry too much about the shadows and the depth of the piece. I am learning some new tricks, so if you know of any other way to do this, please put it in the comments below. I am always willing to learn, and I'd like my pieces to turn out better. So if you think that there's a better way that I can do this, I would love to hear it. Tell me down below. But for now, I'm just using some grays and lighter grays to do the dry brushing over the entire piece until it is fully grayed out. Once I finished with the dry brushing, I realized that some of these edges that I didn't quite want covered up with that white got covered up, so I went ahead and grabbed my tone color water base and just kind of spread it on the piece, letting it seep into those cracks and the crevices. And I do think that it brings back some of the depth that the dry brushing had gotten rid of. The next step of this is to go ahead and add the water, and the way that I do the water is a little odd. I take the lightest color blue that I have and put it around the rocks, and then I give a brighter blue right next to it, followed by a darker blue towards the middle, and then finishing off with just like a little bit of the darkest blue that I have, which is almost a black color. Then, because I'm lazy and I don't want to pull out my airbrusher, I go ahead and I mix all the colors together on a big flat brush, being careful not to mix the black into the darker colors or vice versa. This will hopefully make it appear that the middle of the piece is a little darker or deeper in water than the sides next to the rock. And with that, our water is done, and I'm going to go ahead and just tickle the tips with a very light white color just on the edges of those rocks to bring out some of those highlights once more. Next up, I take the entire piece over to the airbrushing kit. Now, I have not used an airbrush before, and it was pretty tricky, but I had asked the guys at the hobby store, hey, how do I do this? And they said, well, start with your lightest colors first and work your way up to the darkest. So here I am doing what I was told, using the brightest yellow that I have, following it up with a bright orange, and then also finishing it up with a red at the end. But my goal is to make this look like lava. I don't know if I accomplished it or not, but you guys will have to tell me in the comments below, who should I follow? Are there other YouTubers that you guys know of that can teach me how to use this thing? Because this is an amazing tool. I absolutely loved using it, but my gosh, it was a tough one to learn, but I had a lot of fun. And moving on to the water and the lava, I go ahead and add a lot of silicone caulking to it. And then I just use my finger dipped in alcohol to poke it and prod it and move it how it needs to go. And then I also use my finger to kind of push it up and drag it over the rocks to make it look like waves are starting to crash along the shore. This is by no means a trick that I figured out by myself, but I absolutely love whoever showed this to me because it has been a fantastic tool, especially when it came to making like Pokeball terrariums and stuff, because I suck at using resin. I'm just bad at it. Moving right along, we're going to have to go ahead and give our majestic whale a blue base coat. And our Groudon here is going to end up with a bright red base coat, followed by a gray base coat on his tummy. With their base coats down, I go ahead and grab up my white, and I start using the white to fix all of those edges that I just overpainted using either the red or the blue. And Kyogre has a few white spots on his head, mainly around where his eye is, and as well as on his belly. I overpainted Groudon's spikes, so I go ahead and fix those edges up as well. So now Groudon and Kyogre both have their base coats and are looking snazzy. So I go ahead and off camera painted the red. This took me a while, it was kind of tough, but then I painted his eye black, followed by giving him his eyeballs. And with that, our majestic whale has been finished, so let's go ahead and put him into his sea. So I go ahead and dip him into the still wet caulking and press him down nice and firm. Then, using my finger dipped in alcohol again, I go ahead and start pulling those waves up to make it look like he's crashing into or out of the water. Our next step is going to be adding seafoam crests to the water. I'm going to do that by moving this guy off to the side, grabbing an empty jar, and grabbing some snowflake that I found outside. Just kidding, I live down south, we don't snow here. Taking the fake snow, I go ahead and mix in a good amount of glue to it, and then give it a nice mixy-mixy. I'm looking for a consistency like wet frosting. Just like this. Then I go ahead and start adding it to the tips of each of the waves. I also use the sea foam to hide the edges. Then, I grab my paintbrush and start pulling the foam down. This helps to soften the edge. And with that, I think it's time to move on to the project pictures. The land and sea have finally met. It took a lot of foam, some paint, and a lot of silicone. But the Hoenn legends are finally locked in battle. Who do you think wins this round? Does the ocean rise or the volcano erupt? Either way, my desk has never looked more legendary. If you enjoyed this build, hit that like button and that subscribe. Helps this channel way more than a max revive. I hope to see you all in the next one. Thanks for watching.